Dragons can be killed. Today we're talking about children's literature. We'll see you in a moment. Well, hello and welcome back to Elevate Ordinary. I'm your host, JonMark Grodi.
And I'm Teresa Grodi.
And we're back with another great conversation about the ordinary pursuit of truth, goodness, and beauty with one of our favorite topics today. We'll get to that in a moment. We're talking about children's literature with a very special guest, Brittany Inzeo. Before we get to that, I want to remind you, as always, that if you like what we're doing here on Awaken Catholic or here on this show, Elevate Ordinary, go to awakencatholic.org/donate. You can become a part of the Awaken Nation, support this mission of bringing truth through beautiful media. We appreciate that. Also download the app at theawakenapp.io. We've got a great community going there. There's a community element. You can follow the shows there, interact with hosts and other members. It's a great place, and there's special stuff if you have become part of the Awaken Nation. So check that out. Also, download the Hallow app at hallow.app/awaken. You can get a free trial 30-day subscription of that. It also supports the ministry, and it's a great app for helping support your prayer life as a Catholic. So check that out as well. Finally, and last but not least, I want to tell you about select tours here in a moment.
Have you ever dreamed of visiting Paris in the fall? Seeing the beautiful Eiffel Tower lit up by a sunset? Visiting and venerating holy locations of the Sister Saints of France in Lisieux, Paris, Lourdes, and more? This fall 2021, join Select International Tours with Claire Swinarski from The Catholic Feminist, author and speaker Catherine Whitaker, and our amazing hosts Morgan Holliger and Megan Burwell from Awaken's show Naked Without Shame on a once-in-a-lifetime Seine River Cruise pilgrimage. Join our friends at Select International Tours and Cruises. With over 34 years of experience, they are the perfect company to help you experience pilgrimage. To learn more, visit selectinternationaltours.com/awaken. Bon voyage!
Ooh, that sounds like a pretty interesting tour. Yeah. Well, anyway, Teresa, why don't you introduce our guest?
So I'm so excited to be here talking to Brittany Inzeo. I came across her through a group, and we were on a thread talking about children's literature. And she has a blog, Good Books for Catholic Kids, a Catholic Parent's Guide to Worthwhile Literature. And I went over to her blog and fell in love with all of her book lists and reviews. She is a third-generation great books lover, and she's devoted to helping parents fill their homes with what is good, true, and beautiful, which is a shared mission for Awaken Catholic, who is devoted to good, true, and beautiful in art. And so, Brittany, would you please introduce yourself, tell us a little more about your blog, about your mission, and maybe something that you're really excited about right now?
Sure, happy to. So as Teresa said, I'm a second-generation homeschooler. I have three young children that we're homeschooling. We live in rural Virginia now on a small farm where our kids have plenty of room to run around and plenty of space to act out all those great books they spend their time reading. Our homeschooling style is a mix of great books, Charlotte Mason on the one hand, and then outdoor play on the other. And then I also throw in classical memory work. So I guess I would call myself an eclectic homeschool parent. And then my blog. So my blog started back in 2017. I had three children under the age of 4, and I have no idea why I would have started a blog then, other than maybe the Holy Spirit. It must have been a Holy Spirit thing. But one day it just came to me that it would be a neat idea to start talking about books online. And I just kind of plunged right in. My mission right from the get-go was, as Teresa said, to share books that talked about the good, the true, the beautiful, the great books, the classics. I wanted to provide a resource that Catholic parents could come to and really trust that they were getting like an authentically Catholic viewpoint and selection. On my blog, I review lots of great classics, but then I also like to look at popular contemporary series, especially for teens, because part of my mission is helping parents who are too busy to sit there and pre-read every popular series.
That's huge.
Right? So I want to provide them like a popular series, like, okay, this is like a little older, but Hunger Games came along, and not every parent could sit there and read that. So I had to give my point of view on that. And all the popular dystopian series, I've gone through all of them I could find, like the Divergent series, and then like stuff like Game of Thrones series, the books, not the movies. I don't do movies.
Yeah.
But anyway, any popular thing that someone's like, hey, have you, what's your thought on this? I'll just go read it and then write a review on it. And that's how a lot of my reviews happen, is some parent will email me being like, what do you think of this? So I'll just go read it. And then I'll let them know, and then I'll post it.
That's such a phenomenal service, because I don't know how many times we have Googled the title of something and then like Christian review.
Right.
So that it's like maybe somebody will go through every little thing that is like in there that could be objectionable, so we could decide,
Well, parents don't have time to catch up on those new books, but also like our kids are burning through books.
Yeah.
So I don't know if it was on your site, but I did see on a book list for Catholic boys, the Ranger's Apprentice series, for instance. I don't know if you've come across that one. But I ordered the first 4 books from this review, and like 3 days later, my son has read all 4 of them, and I'm like, I haven't even cracked the first 3 chapters, And so, again, you'll be able to have a good place to go for book lists to know some good options for
you have to watch out
readers.
for that Bible, though. Our kids, one of our eldest started reading the Old Testament, and he like brought out this phrase, and I was like, who said that in front of him? And he's like, well, it's from whatever. And I'm like, oh my gosh, don't read the Bible.
The Old Testament is that's not cheat reading.
That's right. I think I was telling you before the show that when I came across your blog, it was the beginning of the shutdown in 2020. And so our library had just closed. And I saw your list, I think it's gardening books for kids, and I probably ordered half off of Amazon. And it was a very good list. We enjoyed all of them, all the ones that we ordered anyway. But some of your lists are like good books for Catholic kids that are also good movies. Beyond Narnia, more great fantasy series for Catholic kids and teens. Have you read the C.S. Lewis Space Trilogy?
I love the C.S. Lewis Space Trilogy.
Us too. Yeah.
Yes.
We named our homeschool the Manor at St. Anne's Academy.
Awesome.
That's a book I want to talk about. Like good book series to read aloud to a Catholic family. I mean, you have tons of lists. You have lists by age, lists by gender, lists by likes. It's just phenomenal. If you have kids and you don't have kids and you want to read good literature, which is what we're going to talk about, why Catholic kids literature is good literature for all ages. Check out her blog. It's goodbooksforcatholickids.com. And you also have a Facebook page?
I do have a Facebook page, a Twitter page, and I'm getting an Instagram page up and running. So
wonderful. Yes. Wonderful. So what is your, let's do a 3-way question here. Okay. So what is your favorite book to read to your kids? Like picture book, like smallish, that you can just pick up and read.
Book. Okay, picture book.
You want to go first? Yeah, go for it.
If you got one. Yeah.
You want me to pick just one?
Like the book you just can't refuse. Questions. You can't refuse reading.
Or a few, if that makes it easier to just.
You can a few authors, maybe?
Sure. Go for it.
Okay, so some of my favorite picture book authors. I love Elsa Beskow. She's a Scandinavian author, and she does children's books. Beautiful illustrations. Some of them are fairy tale types, and some of them they're just all. I love the illustrations. I also love Shirley Hughes. Is this British author who did all of these charming little stories about little preschool age brother, sister, little families, and just their day-to-day life. And she did all her own illustrations, and they're just lovely. Another one, modern, very modern, is I love Jan Brett's illustrations are beautiful. Yeah. And then I also really enjoy fairy tales that have been beautifully illustrated. So Ruth Sanderson, I think. Ruth Sanderson, she does some gorgeous fairy tale illustrations. Paul Galdone. So I'm a sucker for any beautiful fairy tale retelling.
Yeah.
We ended up getting those yellow, red, blue fairy stories that I think Chesterton mentions that he read as a kid. And I was thinking like,
Andrew Lang.
yeah. I was thinking like these beautiful like fairy tale books or whatever. But this is like my Teresa American idea of like fairy tales. And these were incredibly gruesome. Our son loves them. Our 9-year-old loves them now. But I sat down and read them, I think, before bed. And I was like, this is not bedtime reading. So the book that I like cannot refuse when the kids bring it to me, this is going to sound so silly, but it's Go Dog Go by P.D. Eastman. I feel silly saying this because we're talking about great literature, but my grandpa used to babysit me. So he was my primary babysitter. And he used to read that, and he used to read it like with this amazing like inflection. And so I love bringing that inflection to the kids. And I also like, we found this, the Flower Fairies series. I don't know if you've ever seen that, but it like goes through the different flowers, the different seasons, like fall, winter, spring, and then like maybe garden fairies or something like roadside fairies. But they're just like fairies drawn into the different flowers in the meadow or whatever. And they're lovely and they're beautifully drawn.
That sounds lovely. I'll have to look that one up.
Yeah, it's gorgeous. Oh, I should have brought it. Too bad.
Oh man,
JonMark,
I'm not good on the spot here, but the one that we've discovered is an author called Jonathan Bean. He did a book called "This Is My Home, This Is My School," and he's describing. Well, there's that one, and then what's the other one that goes
like
along
building
with that?
it's like something about building his house.
Yeah, but his I don't know if he illustrated it, but the illustrations are very fun. And "This Is My Home, This Is My School." It's all about contrasting. Well, it's a homeschool. They're describing their home, and they're homeschooled, and so it's talking about the different rooms. Oh, this is the cafeteria, and there comes the cafeteria lady, and it's mom who's had a long morning. It's a fun book.
Yeah,
so
it's a wonderful book.
Yeah.
So tell us more about your passion.
So I believe that stories are going to save our world, save our culture. They're just so important because if you think about it, this is how wisdom's always been passed on through even before history, right?
Mm-hmm.
People told stories to pass on the wisdom of the ages, and children's literature is sometimes in the place of like a fairy tale or a fable or folk tale. That is the stories that have been told for all these generations, or sometimes it's a newer story, but it has that classic feel that you can tell it is going to be passed on. And these are stories that develop children on so many levels. They develop them on an individual level by nourishing their imagination and their ability to see beyond what's going on in this world to the fact that there's another dimension, another world, right? The possibility that heaven's right around the corner. They also help the child on a cultural and civic level by teaching them, empathy, ability to see someone else's life and see that there's something outside of them as a child. There's other people with other experiences, and how to enter into the other person's experience and kind of live their life, walk in their shoes a little bit. So stories are just so powerful in teaching children these things. They really develop the soul of the child by nourishing that sacramental imagination, I think would be the term for it.
I love that term. Yeah.
Sacramental imagination, that God is present in creation, and the physical things and stories we read that can be like this window into understanding a little bit more about God or about our own humanity. You see that in C.S. Lewis. I love Narnia. Narnia was the book that I read 50 times as a kid from beginning to end. And I think that C.S. Lewis is very blatantly, really, as an adult, telling the children, this is how to read, this is how to approach a story. Open this door, you open the wardrobe door and you go through and you're in this other world and you learn this wisdom, these truths there. And then you go back through the wardrobe and you take those truths back into your life, and you live a little better. You learn something new.
I love that point because in some sense, the devil's advocate sometimes to fairy stories or to escapist literature. I love Tolkien's essay on that. Talking about, well, you're going off mentally to another world. It's not your world. And one thing that happens, I think, when you read great literature, especially great, fantastic literature, is that you recognize, well, in many ways, our world, the world that we live in terms of our experience, is very unreal, in terms of how we see it, how we've been taught, what we've picked up from the culture, because a lot of it comes down to our interpretation, the worldview that we've sort of just absorbed. And as you say, when you go through the wardrobe, you're experiencing a different world, but in some sense, you're learning about the reality of your own world. So you come back and you're actually seeing your world more clearly. You're seeing, providence and free will. You're seeing good and evil. You're seeing virtue and vice. Those were all here before, but they were maybe under the surface. And now you're actually seeing the realities of things more clearly.
Yeah. So I'm a historian, and I spent the majority of my adult life being a nonfiction snob. I thought that I didn't understand why people would read fiction when you could learn so much about the world, through science or through history or through studying real events and being told things. And it wasn't until my first child was born and I was nursing him and I only had what I could reach on this one shelf. And I picked up C.S. Lewis's, the one on purgatory.
The Great Divorce.
The Great Divorce. And I read it in that one sitting while I was nursing him. Possibly most of it, that first sitting. And I remember shutting it and just being like, I was blown away at the way in which what just happened to me taught me about purgatory in not using like fact words. It was like I went to this other place and experienced it, and I was just blown away. And the second book that we read that was fiction was the Space Trilogy, C.S. Lewis's Space Trilogy, and that just blew my mind. We've at least read the third book, That Hideous Strength, 10 times. I think I stopped counting at 10. But it is the realist worldview I look through, truly. Yeah.
I referenced that quote from C.S. Lewis at the beginning. I'll read it, the full thing, and then you can maybe comment on it, Brittany, because I'm sure you've heard it before. I'm sure it comes up in your work a lot. I'm sorry, this is Chesterton. The Lewis quote will come later. Chesterton writes in Tremendous Trifles, "Fairy tales do not give the child his first idea of bogey. What fairy tales give the child is his first clear idea of the possible defeat of bogey. The baby has known the dragon intimately ever since he had an imagination. What the fairy tale provides for him is a St. George to kill the dragon." The popular iteration of that quote, I think, is wrong, but it still gets to the essence. That fairy tales don't teach the kids that there is a dragon so much as dragons can be killed.
Yes. Absolutely. And that's the point of fairy tales,
Yeah.
Like Teresa said, they can seem scary to us as adults, but, children already have fears, right from the get-go. Everything in the world is kind of scary to them, right? Like even a car going by to a little kid or a vacuum. There's so many scary things in a kid's world. They know fear from a very young age. And yeah, fairy tales give them that hope that, okay, yeah, there's evil, there's fear in the world, but like, I can deal with this. Every man in the fairy tale deals with this and they win, and I can too. Yeah, they provide the hope the child needs, really, to continue on.
They also flesh out the idea of good and evil. Again, kids have an innate sense. They know they have fears, and they develop a sense of good is to be done and evil avoided. We all have that sort of intuitive sense underlying our conscious engagement with morality. But without having to necessarily go out in the world and work for a Scrooge, they can encounter a Scrooge in literature and learn the greasy, grimy dirtiness of greed before they go out and necessarily work for somebody like that. They can encounter that vice and the opposing virtues experientially through literature, hopefully before they get out into the world, so that they're more prepared. They're practicing. They're understanding those more. Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah, the ability to hone discernment, right? Before the ability to live multiple lives without actually being able to live multiple lives. Yeah, that's incredible. I was thinking about, so as you were describing what you want for your children, what you're trying to provide for other Catholic parents in terms of a library, but that library kind of creates a framework for a life lived, like it created a framework for your life lived. And we're going to come back and we're going to talk to you about Jane Austen in another episode. And I was kind of thinking about Jane Austen's life because she was the daughter of a clergyman in England. She died in early 1800s. And her parents were working parents. They were not wealthy. They were fine. They were working parents. He was a clergyman, and his mother worked hard to raise her 8 children. And all of the children, it was a happy home. It was a safe home. It was a home with lots of happy interaction with the siblings. But it was also a home that loved literature, and the written word was really elevated. And what you see that came from that is Jane Austen's mind. Her ability to be in her own life, her own tiny life, that that wasn't as grand as her brothers who went off in the Navy and went to all these different places and experienced all these different things. But what was given to her through a safe home full of family love and ample work, good hard work, and the ability to ponder was that she could see her ordinary world, and she was able to take all the vice and virtue, all the theology that her father, was teaching, was preaching the gospel. And she was able to lay it out like a genius. Like she was truly the mistress of vice and virtue in ordinary hearts. And that's what I want to provide that for my children. I want them to have this safe, safe, you know what I mean? Like this framework where they can truly be free to ponder, to think about morality, and then to allow their own creativity and what God is calling them to be able to flourish in its own way.
You. Yeah, you. You know you've always wanted to go to Paris. Well, now's your chance. If you go with Select International Tours, the sponsor of today's Awaken Catholic Show episode, you can join Claire Swinarski from the Catholic Feminist podcast, as well as author and speaker Catherine Whitaker, and our amazing hosts Morgan Holliger and Megan Burwell from Awaken's show Naked Without Shame, on a once-in-a-lifetime Seine River cruise pilgrimage in France. Visit and venerate the sister saints of France in Lisieux, Paris, Lourdes, and more. Sacre bleu! Learn more by visiting selectinternationaltours.com/awaken.
No, that's a beautiful vision. And I think I feel very similarly. And that's, what inspired me to want to share that with other parents, to give them some of the tools. Not everyone comes from a literary background, so they've got to start somewhere. Like JonMark, you were saying that you also come from a homeschooling background where there's lots of literature. We have that in common. But so many Catholic parents I meet, neither parent comes from a background where literature was valued. Unfortunately, in public schools, they don't necessarily value literature in the same way that your average homeschool family might. So these parents are really looking for ideas, I've found. Many of them email me going, hey, I want more ideas on this subject or more ideas for this age range, because I don't know. I've never read any of this.
Yeah.
So how do you keep your books at home? Do you have like a primary library and then they're kind of like scattered about, or like maybe kind of tell us what a home with lots of books in it looks like? We have a home with lots of books.
My grandfather, he just turned 100 this week, and he was this huge inspiration in my life. His house is completely full of books, every room. And he always told me that a room without books was like a body without a soul, right? He quotes that quote. So for me, I don't keep my books in just like one location in a showcase. We have books in every room of our house. Yeah, every room of our house. And they're scattered on tables, and they're on top, piled on top of bookshelves. We have a lot of books. And I think that it's the feast. It's putting the feast out for your kids, that let them browse, like make your house a library. And then they pick up this book and read a few pages, and then maybe they read this other book, and it's okay. They'll come back to the things that really interest them, and they always have the opportunity. I'll try to get my kids to do math, and I'll find that they've wandered off and they're just sitting there with a book in the corner of the house. That's my problem as a homeschool parent. And I'm like, how can I possibly judge, right? I'm giving you all these options, and okay, I guess you're reading again instead of doing math. Okay.
Have you, just as an aside, because this is really important to our discussion, have you come across Life of Fred Math?
I have, yes.
We love it. Our kids, we keep it on a low shelf, and they pull it off, and we'll find them in a a pile of math books, and they're just rereading. And we're talking even 5, 8, and 9-year-olds, just rereading these math books. Yeah. They're amazing.
There's probably, I'm sure there's people in our audience, that to some degree we've felt this way. Teresa, you certainly felt this way when we got married, that we get a glimpse of people talking about books and about sort of literature, and we feel like we've missed the boat on that, either because of our upbringing or just because maybe we were never a super disciplined reader. I play a pretty good literature buff on TV, but I'm not a super disciplined reader. I don't actually get around to reading tons of books. So with people in mind who maybe feel like they would like to get into this, and maybe they have kids or they're going to have kids, how does one start down that road for yourself, and then to lay out this feast in one's home for one's children?
Well, for oneself, depending on your personality, I'd say either pick one book and just aim to read one book this year, or if you're more ambitious type, pick one book from each of, say, 5 categories. Pick a fiction, a biography, nonfiction, a spiritual work, and some other genre of your choice, and try to read a chapter from each of the books each week. And by the end of the year, you'll have read 5 books in that case. And then you kind of can zero in on, ooh, I like this particular genre or whatever. And then as far as for children, I think you need to start with where you're at. If you're just expecting your first, then don't worry about collecting the classics for the middle grade yet. Just start with building a picture book library. Yeah. Just focus on buying, 10 beautiful picture books, each year. And then, as your child grows, grow the library with them. Try to always be buying for Christmas. For us, we give Christmas presents of books to our kids, birthday presents of books for our kids. If they have something for Easter, it's going to be a book. We take all those opportunities where parents give gifts, and it's usually going to be a book in our house. Yeah. And that's, our kids are actually excited about that.
Yeah.
It's not a bad thing. That's the way we build our library. It's just taking advantage of all those little opportunities to give the kids something, and it's going to be a book in that case.
Yeah.
Yeah. One of the humps I had to get over initially when I still had very, very young children is that I still had this mindset of this college checklist. Okay, we've read this book and now it goes away, or we go to the library and we'll get the next 10 books on this list, and then they go away and go back to the library, as opposed to doing something like going to a place like your blog and picking out great books. It's just like you said, 10 great picture books, like the classics of picture books, with really gorgeous pictures, a beautiful story. And then just getting accustomed to reading over and over and over and over again. That's something that children love. And it's what solidifies in their mind. It's what teaches them that vocabulary and sentence structure and all these wonderful things that are building blocks for phenomenal language. But that was a really hard, and especially too, as I was trying to, I've never read fiction in my adult life. How do I even get into this? I was looking to checklists. But then I came across, so C.S. Lewis, I started reading more of C.S. Lewis, and I started just rereading. Yeah. Rereading the Space Trilogy, rereading Narnia. Then I got into Jane Austen, and I've reread, and sometimes I will finish the book and just turn it right back over again. So that because it's a muscle you kind of have to exercise. Yeah. You have to learn how to read again, how to have that attention span.
Well, and again, I think there's a key distinction there. And I think maybe you could probably speak to this more intelligently than we can, Brittany. But the difference between content, again, whether we're speaking of books but you could also, I think, maybe think in terms of movies or music, there's content that really does bear rereading and content that just doesn't. That doesn't necessarily mean the other content's worthless, but there are certain books that you could reread for the rest of your life. Lord of the Rings or Narnia or Jane Austen books, and there's always something new. You can go deeper and deeper, and so whether we're talking about children's, beautiful picture books, we're talking about fantasy literature, there are books that bear that rereading, and then there's those that just don't, and it seems like that's part of what when we're talking about the reason to look at book lists is we want to know if I'm going to bring a book into my house where it's going to be read over and over by multiple children and an individual child many times. I wanted to have books that bear that rereading, that there is a depth to go into there.
Yes, you're basically saying the classics, right?
Yeah.
Kind of what makes a book a classic, right? One of the things is a timeless appeal. I know C.S. Lewis says this, that a great book is never just for children, that everyone should be able to enjoy it. I know there's a quote, but I'm forgetting in what, but yeah, everyone should be able to enjoy a great children's book.
Yeah.
Right. And everyone does enjoy Narnia. I still like reading Narnia aloud to my kids, to my family. And then, a classic, I think also the reason it's timeless is because it speaks to something that's true or good or beautiful that, our soul recognizes and responds to. And that's going to be felt generations after the book was written, because these things are in everyone's souls, these desires for God, desires for beauty, for truth. And some of my favorite books that my children and I have read many times are books that that fit those criteria. They apply to all the different ages. All my kids of all ages can enjoy them. And there's something in there that is growing their souls, growing their imaginations, and they respond to no matter how many times they've heard it. They just listen to Narnia on audiobook, or I read it to them over and over, and it never gets old.
Yeah.
There's always something new.
Yeah. I was thinking about bringing up audiobooks because there are some books that are really straightforward, like Little House on the Prairie or Narnia. But then there are other books where, I would try to read Beatrix Potter books to my kids, and I'd just be like, this is what people think is classic. And until I heard somebody perform it well, kind of like when you hear somebody perform Shakespeare, whereas before it sounds
very
so
flat until you heard somebody.
Or sometimes you read the Bible and you're just like, these people are so boring. But then you hear somebody perform it well, somebody who loves the literature, knows it deeply. And Beatrix Potter is amazing. Absolutely like the genius of mixing nature with these personalities is just phenomenal. But I had no idea until it was performed to me. So we absolutely love audiobooks in our home. And actually too, so if you're going back to if you're thinking about how do I get into literature and you pick up a classic and you're just like, this is flat, this is dry. Perhaps find a performance of it, either an audiobook or watch the movie, because the thing about classics is that we're going to talk about Jane Austen here in the next episode, and it's okay to have spoilers because you're going to read it again and again and again. You're going to watch the performance of it again and again because it is so good.
That's so interesting. Again, the whole notion of spoilers, that really comes out of a culture where we have content that's really only worth one watch. And so if you spoil it, there's almost no point in watching it or reading it. But with great literature, it's not the end of the world if you spoil it or if maybe the first time you read it, it's the audio book or whatever, because it does bear that rereading. You might the first time you read it, you may be chasing after the plot, but the next time you're getting a deeper level than you got the first time.
Absolutely. And with really, really great classics, I'm thinking maybe even some adult classics at this point, the author intends for you to go back to the beginning and reread it, because sometimes you don't know to the end something that will then make the whole beginning so much richer. I think of Brideshead. I love Brideshead Revisited. I've read it over and over, and each time I see more of what Evelyn Waugh was trying to get at. But you have to read the whole thing, or you don't even understand the beginning. Understand. Yeah.
So I want to say, I thought at one point I was reading Brideshead Revisited, This was my
this is so
first time
funny. Yeah.
using my Kindle app on my phone.
Mhm.
Okay. And on the Kindle app, it doesn't tell you what you're reading on every page like a book does. And so I'm like reading this and I'm just like, this is so weird. You know, because I wanted to read the best book
She's
of the
asking me
20th
like,
century.
Brideshead.
Well, I had nightmares.
Not what I expected.
And I'm like, is this going to be like a post, what is that called? Post-apocalyptic thing. Because I'm just getting nightmares from like that. And he's like, Brideshead Revisited is like Downton Abbey. And I'm like, what am I reading? It turned out I was reading The Man Who Is Thursday.
Which if you know both those novels, like, yeah, that's kind of, it's going to mess you up a little bit.
They're both great novels, but nothing alike.
Yeah, I have not gotten to read Brideshead Revisited because part of me hasn't gotten over that. Anyway, So I should give it a try.
You should, and then read it again because it's one of those books that you need to read probably at least 3 times to begin to see what it's doing with the plot.
I was going to read that full quote that you referenced early, Brittany, and I'll let you comment on it. I have a bunch of thoughts on it, but I'll let you go first, any direction you'd like. But this is that quote from C.S. Lewis from Of Other Worlds, Essays and Stories. He writes, "It is usual to speak in a playfully apologetic tone about one's adult enjoyment of what are called children's books. I think the convention is a silly one. No book is really worth reading at the age of 10, which is not equally, and often far more, worth reading at the age of 50, except, of course, books of information. The only imaginative works we ought to grow out of are those which it would have been better not to have read at all." Your thoughts?
Can I have it again?
Sure.
Sorry.
What do you say after a C.S. Lewis quote? He's just so articulate. No, I mean, I think he's getting at the timelessness of a really good story, that there's this window into the greater reality, and whether you're 6 or 66, you're going to appreciate going through that door and getting some wisdom and coming back.
Yeah. Well, one thing that comes to my mind immediately is how we do this weird thing as modern parents or teachers and educators, where we give our kids things that we ourselves kind of find repulsive or like pathetically droll or silly. Like, as
thinking of Jake and the Neverland Pirates.
You get into the territory, maybe you're stepping on somebody's toes of what they like, but I think we a while back we did a real culling of our children's books because we just accumulated so many big piles of them. And I just recognized we have a number of titles that had slipped in there, mostly really modern ones and mostly really like mass-produced, unartfully produced ones that I'm just like, I just think this is a dumb book. Why am I having my kid read it? Or like some books I started getting rid of where we had old Disney movies were pretty beautiful representations of old fairy tales, but oftentimes they would translate those fairy tale movies into very, very poorly written picture books representing what was in the movies. And some of the imagery was beautiful because some of those old ones were rather beautifully illustrated, but the actual prose was so... Well, it was like, some intern just kind of like slapped it down. And so again, I noticed it myself, like, I think this is really dumb. Why would I be expecting my kids to like this? Or why would I want them reading this over and over again? Versus, again, like some of the books you referenced earlier, a book that we read, we recognize it may be oriented towards a child, but the prose can still be beautiful. Even if it's simple, it can still be very beautiful. And that's the kind of book that I want my kid to read and reread.
Absolutely. And, children who only read that mass-produced, poorly written type of book you're talking about, then they have trouble as they get older actually appreciating something beautifully written.
Yeah.
I use a tag on my blog I call Turkish Delight.
Yes.
And it's a Narnia reference, of course, because, Eustace, he eats that Turkish Delight and all he can think about is wanting more of that like quick, easy, goes down smoothly, pleasure. And he can't think beyond that anymore. He can't even use his reason. He can't think about his siblings. He just loses all ability to appreciate true goodness and beauty. He can't, he thinks he hears about Aslan. And he thinks he must be this terrible creature. And, why is his reaction different than the other kids? Because he's been eating that Turkish Delight. So I equate that to the books that are,
I love that analogy. We use that with our kids too. Our analogy is just simply between food and candy. Our kids get that in terms of food. We'll ask them, what happens if you eat too much candy? Oh, well, you'll get sick, and all these bad things will happen. So our kids recognize instinctively from their own experience that, hey, there's food, like you eat to live. Food is to be healthy, it's to nourish your body. What's candy for? What's cake for? Well, maybe a special occasion, maybe to celebrate somebody's birthday, but you don't make a diet out of candy or cake. And so I think similar to, that's how we talk about literature or movies or TV. It's like sometimes a kid will ask to watch something, or to read something, and we'll say, no, we don't want you to watch or read that. And they'll say, well, there's nothing bad in it. And I say, I didn't say there was something bad in it, but that's candy. That's Turkish Delight. And so, it's okay once in a while, but your diet should be this stuff, this nourishing stuff.
Yes.
Yeah.
You only have so much mental space and so many hours in a day. Like, we want to fill it up with good things. Well, thank you so much, Brittany, for joining us today. Can you tell people again where we can find you?
At goodbooksforcatholickids.com is my website. And then there's also a Facebook page.
Yeah. And please check out her website. I mean, she has so many book lists. Like, you'll be able to find something for your child. You'll be able to find something for you. And you have newer book reviews, you said earlier in the episode, so that if you want to know whether or not your young teen, tween, whatever should be reading this book, or check out her reviews. So you want to lead us out, sweetie?
Sure thing. Yeah, thanks again for joining us for this episode of Elevate Ordinary. As I said before, please go to awakencatholic.org/donate and become part of the Awaken Nation to support this mission of sharing truth through beautiful media. Yeah. Also download the app at theawakenapp.io. Download the Hallow app at hallow.app/awaken. Hey, and we'll see you again next time for another great conversation about the ordinary pursuit of truth, goodness, and beauty. God bless.
This show and all media on Awaken Catholic is made possible by the Awaken Nation and the Hallow app. The Awaken Nation is a community of people like you who support all things Awaken for as cheap as a cup of coffee a week and get access to exclusive content. Learn more by visiting awakencatholic.org/donate. Hallow is the only audio-guided Catholic prayer app focused on contemplative prayer and traditional Catholic meditation such as Lectio Divina, Daily Examen, and the Rosary. We here at Awaken all use Hallow every day and love it. To learn more or give it a try, visit hallow.app/awaken.